Welcome to the show. Today, we are going to dive deep into a very special set of materials. This time, it is titled and contributed by the auspicious Australia Buddha Way Association. And the core theme is Metta, loving kindness. Usually, when we hear this word Metta, what comes to mind may be a very warm and soft feeling. But today's text proposes a completely different view. It says that Metta is actually a kind of power, a very strong inner technology. It is a strategy that can proactively eliminate one's own suffering as well as that of others. Exactly, rather than calling it an emotion. I feel it is more like a practice of wisdom. The format of this material is actually a deep Q&A session between a master and a disciple. They begin with a sentence from the Maharatnakara Sutra, taking an ancient concept and analyzing it layer by layer in a very modern, even somewhat startling way. I think this journey will be very interesting. It will start from a thought in our mind as tiny as whether or not to have a snack, and extend all the way to that kind of universal, unconditional compassion. Alright, let us begin with that line from the scripture. Right at the start, the text mentions, Metta can dispel the afflictions of following the Mara. This term afflictions of following the Mara, wow, it sounds a bit scary, yet it feels very apt. It feels as though we are often, unconsciously, obeying the voice of some little demon inside us. Doesn't it? Yes. That is the interesting part. To put it simply, the master's explanation is that we humans are often in a state of self-contradiction. The innate motivation of every one of us is to seek peace and happiness and avoid suffering. Right? Yes, that is human nature. Yet, we often do the exact opposite. The text calls those inner impulses of greed, anger, and ignorance the Mara of affliction. Those afflictions of following the Mara mean that we follow these impulses, thinking they will bring happiness. But the result is that we dig an even bigger pit for ourselves to jump into. I completely understand this point of contradiction. Just like staying up late to binge watch a show, the happiness in that moment is very real. But when you have to wake up early for work the next day, the pain is also doubly real. But if we are naturally meant to seek peace and happiness, why does our brain drive us to do these things that ultimately lead to suffering? How does the text explain this trap of short-term pleasure and long-term pain? This is the key. The text suggests that we are being deceived by labels. We stick a label called happiness onto behaviors like binge watching or eating desserts. So, the brain automatically navigates toward them. Therefore, the first and most important step of Metta is inward-facing. True compassion is first being compassionate toward oneself. When you truly wish for yourself to attain long-term peace and happiness, you must find the courage to defy those impulses masquerading as happiness. So true Metta is not about self-indulgence, saying I will do whatever I want. Instead, it is more like a very strict but loving parent saying to that inner child who wants to eat their fill of candy, no, this is not good for you. Exactly so, this raises a question very much worth your consideration. How many of our actions in a day are unconsciously following the Mara of affliction? And how many are choices truly made based on Metta for our long-term peace and happiness? Just how concrete is the damage caused by following these afflictions? Next, the text uses a metaphor to make this very abstract harm extremely concrete, even a bit hair-raising. This metaphor of the blood-brain barrier is truly very persuasive, but it also makes one a bit anxious. The text specifically targets the desire for gluttony, especially for sugar. It says that every bite of sugar we eat is converted into acidic substances within the body, and this acid then directly attacks a vital line of defense in our brain. Yes, that defensive line is called the blood-brain barrier. You can imagine it as the brain's customs office, which very strictly regulates what can enter and what cannot. In order to protect our delicate brain from being contaminated by harmful substances in the blood, the text's metaphor is that the acid produced by every bite of sugar is like splashing corrosive liquid onto the walls of this customs office. It emphasizes that even if it doesn't corrode through immediately, every intake is a tangible act of destruction. Just as dripping water wears away stone, every time we follow the thought of wanting to eat sweet, we are weakening the protective wall of our mind. To make this more relatable, the text even proposes an inference. When acidic substances in the body are excessive, they may weaken capillary walls, making a person more prone to unexplained bruising or circulation issues. It directly links a dietary habit to physical changes that you can see. This directly hooks a philosophical concept, the harm of greed, to a physiological mechanism. It is telling us that the harm of afflictions is not some future matter or a retribution in the next life, but is happening in the present continuous tense. Every act of following greed is eroding the hardware of our mind. When our brain's hardware is damaged, memory and analytical abilities will both decline. Usually, the disasters we talk about refer to external events like unemployment or bankruptcy. But the text says that the true hardship is the decline of your mental capacity, because you won't even have the tools left to solve problems. This perspective completely subverts my perception of risk. To lose even the ability to find a way out, that is the most fundamental dead end. And all of this originates from our daily habit of following those seemingly harmless tiny thoughts, like wanting to eat something tasty. Alright, you have successfully made me feel a hint of guilt over that sugary drink I just had. However, just knowing the harm is not enough. Does the text provide specific defensive strategies? Of course it does, and the method is very vivid. The text provides a psychological technique called label tearing. It says that when the thought of wanting to eat something tasty, that is, the false label, emerges, we should not suppress it or argue with it. Instead, it's like catching a sneaky little brat doing something bad in your heart. With a playful yet clear-headed attitude, you say to it, "Ha, you've slipped out again. Why don't you look at what you actually are when analyzed? Aren't you just a pile of acid that corrodes my brain? How could you even be called delicacy?" Then, after catching it, there is a further action called the full friction technique. Yes, it involves imagining this thought as a concrete object, then pinning it to the floor in your mind and grinding it harshly. While grinding it, you must also scold it for all its harms. What are you trying to turn me into? Do you want my blood-brain barrier to be breached? Do you want to ruin my memory and make my head foggy? Do you want to make me lose my ability to solve problems? Just keep grinding until you feel it has turned into ash and vanished completely. This sounds quite violent, but it seems like it would be very effective. It is essentially a very powerful form of cognitive behavioral therapy. What you are doing is interrupting an automated negative thought loop and then using a strong, conscious action to rewrite it. The label here is the automated connection we have built unconsciously. That dessert equals delicious equals happiness. The process of friction is using rational analysis and a profound awareness of the consequences to destroy this connection. Of course, you don't actually need to start gesturing on the office floor. This is entirely an inner psychological theater. But the point is the attitude, not fear or suppression, but a kind of I see through you clear-headedness and sense of command. The text mentions that the number of times we have eaten tasty food since we were young equals the number of labels we have attached. That sounds like a massive undertaking, but the most interesting part is, it says grinding one can remove 10,000 of them. How is that possible? Because this is not a one-on-one war of attrition. Our false understanding is like a giant spider web. Everything is interconnected. When you truly see through the essence and harm of a certain grade from its roots through one very deep and committed session of friction, the power of that realization will radiate through the entire network like a powerful earthquake. It will shake that core false belief of as long as I like it, anything goes, and then, in turn, cause tens of thousands of related labels based on that belief to loosen and become invalid all at once. If I do this kind of house cleaning in my heart every day, will it eventually become unnecessary to consciously perform the friction? Because those thoughts will simply have no chance to grow. Exactly. That is the state of densely protecting the dignity of conduct mentioned in the text. Your mental protective net becomes so dense that thoughts of affliction simply cannot penetrate. You aren't suppressing them. Rather, there is simply no conflict left within. Therefore, a lasting serenity and joy will naturally flow out. The text describes it as being like Maitreya Bodhisattva, who is always smiling, because his inner state is one of total peace. That joy cannot be hidden. The text also uses another metaphor, like anointing the body with exquisite fragrance. A person who truly practices metta radiates a sense of peace and happiness. This stable temperament makes people around you feel comfortable and joyful, making them willing to be near you. It is the natural manifestation of an inner state. There is another term I find particularly profound, can be coded with the raiment of shame and remorse. Here, shame is not guilt or low self-esteem, but a high sense of responsibility and alertness. Like an experienced guard who knows which part of the castle is the weakest. You remain vigilant at all times. To put on this raiment means you profoundly understand how easily your thoughts can be enticed. So you maintain humility. When a bad thought pops up, you notice it immediately, rather than waiting for it to lead to a major disaster. From inner protection to outward fragrance, and then to continuous vigilance, all of this eventually leads to the ability to dispel all hardships. Because your mind remains clear and your hardware is intact, you naturally stay away from various internal and external disasters. By guarding the smallest thoughts in your heart, you can handle life's greatest challenges. The 3 levels of metta. We have moved from a tiny thought to a complete inner transformation. Does this path have a larger blueprint? The text divides the practice of metta into 3 levels. Metta based on sentient beings. This is the most fundamental. Your compassion originates from a specific object called sentient beings. You make a vow. I wish for all lives to attain peace and happiness. This is the realm of a bodhisattva who has just set their heart on the path. Metta based on the Dharma. You soon discover that passion is not enough. You might even help in the wrong way. So you study the Dharma, the methods and laws of the universe. What is true peace? How do we achieve it? At this stage, your compassion is supported by methodology and wisdom. Conditionless Metta. This is the realm of high-level bodhisattvas who have realized the endurance of the unarisen. Compassion no longer requires any conditions or reasons. It is not for the sake of a specific being, nor is it based on a specific method. Compassion, like air and sunlight, has become a part of their essence. It is omnipresent, spontaneous, and unconditional. To understand how this operates, the text uses an extremely modern metaphor. A bodhisattva who has reached conditionless metta does not even need to appear before you. As long as your internet address is entered correctly and your password is correct, you can connect directly and receive their help. This explains that the highest level of compassion transcends the limitations of time and space. It's like a super server that never shuts down. The only question is whether we ourselves know the address and the password. This journey is wonderful, from a thought about wanting sugar all the way to connecting with a cosmic level network of compassion. It reveals the deepening process of metta, from a concern with an object, to a practice based on truth, and finally to a state of selflessness that merges into the essence. Metta is far more than a warm emotion. It is an active inner cultivation that requires wisdom and courage. It requires us to identify those afflictions masquerading as happiness and use methods like label tearing and full friction to dismantle their rule. The starting point is simply the sincere wish that oneself and others can attain true peace, free from the erosion of afflictions, from avoiding the tiny damage to the brain caused by a single bite of sugar, to finally developing unconditional compassion that pervades all places. This path is long, but every step is filled with practical benefits. If we understand this password as our own state of mind, a state of purity, kindness, and a thirst for wisdom then in our daily lives, has there ever been a moment when, due to a chance virtuous thought or a moment of extreme clarity, we have actually received help from this network of conditionless metta without realizing it?